Peloton is massively popular, stupidly popular. Last quarter, they made $1.26 billion. That's 3 months. I've had it about 6 weeks. The classes are addictive, the instructors are fun, but all I really care about is, if I ride this, do I get faster on my real bike? The answer is yes, or the short answer is yes. If you do any kind of training program, you're probably going to improve, but the long answer and the story behind this training program is a little more complicated. It's full of ups and downs, some tears, a lot of screaming, and a lot of pain. But in order to understand it, you first have to understand a 3-word acronym, FTP. FTP stands for Functional Threshold Power. Put simply, it's the amount of energy you can expend over the course of 1 hour if you're going all out, like pushing as hard as you can. It's measured in watts. World tour riders, like those in the Tour de France, their FTP is like north of 400 watts, which is just insane. Really good amateurs, their FTP is gonna be in the 300s. The rest of us, we're down like 200, 100. I performed an FTP test on my real bike up at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. I ended up with an FTP of 234. It's respectable. It's nowhere near any kind of like professional level. There are definitely no scouts coming to my door. I was able to measure my FTP using these. These are Favero Asioma Duo power meter pedals. The way they work is the amount of pressure that you put on the pedal while you're cycling around is measured, and then that is output as watts on my cycling computer. Peloton measures power in a completely different way. It's a combination of the resistance on the dial that you set and your cadence, or like the number of revolutions per minute. So it takes those two variables, inputs them into whatever algorithm they have, and maps it on a power curve. That's less accurate than this. Peloton says it's accurate within like 10%, I think. I can't remember if it's plus or minus 10% or just like 10%. Either way, this is plus or minus 1%. Remember that, because the fact that these record differently is going to come back in a very annoying way later on in the video. For those of you who are familiar with indoor training, you may be wondering at this point, why did you get a Peloton? Why not get like a Wahoo Kicker or a Tax Neo? Well, I live in California. Coming from New York especially, like this weather is amazing. Like sometimes it's in the 50s and you put on a jacket and you ride and you're good. Like I haven't seen a need for indoor trainer yet, but I've been trying to get my fiance Val into riding for a while. So when she casually mentioned, hey, should we get a Peloton as a way to like kind of like get in better shape right before the wedding? Who am I to say no?
Looking good, you look strong, you look fit, I love it.
Let's talk about the details of this little experiment I'm doing. So to make this work, at the end of the training program, I have to go back to the Rose Bowl and do another FTP test. If it's higher than the first one, we're good. If it's lower, I guess it's been a terrible training program. The specific training program I did is called Discover Your Power Zones. How majestic. It's a 5-week course, 4 to 6 classes a week. I think there's like 25 classes in total. At the beginning, they introduce you to your power zones. In the middle, you're working to build those power zones. And then at the end, you test again to see if you've improved. I'm not gonna do like a full review of the program because there are plenty of like Peloton reviews. I will say I enjoyed it. I like that they train with power zones because everybody's power zones are unique to them. My power zones are different from Val's power zones. And that's because they're all based on your FTP. There are 7 of them. Zone 1 is active recovery. Basically, like it's an all day, like you could just ride and ride and ride and ride and ride, and it's pretty easy. Zones 2 and 3 are endurance, but it's still like an aerobic exercise, like you're jogging. Zone 4 is like your FTP. So it's your all out pace as hard as you can go for an hour. If you're doing it right, if your FTP is correct, after that hour, you will collapse. Zone 5, 6, and 7, you're transitioning from aerobic power to anaerobic power. So those zones are focusing more on muscular strength. And again, because everybody's FTP is different, everybody's power zones are different. And the cool thing is the instructors will be like, okay, now we're in zone 1, now we're in zone 4, now we're in
Zone 3 in 3, 2, 1, go.
But you're doing your zone 3 Whereas like everybody else in class is doing their zone 3. One of the instructors says it's like having a personal trainer at scale. Seems like the perfect way to get stronger, right? What could possibly go wrong? I'm assuming future Mitch already explained this. Okay, so I have a little bit of a confession to make. There was some time between when I took the FTP test and when I started the Discover Your Power Zones program. It was a month, and I'd just barely gotten these pedals, so I was really excited to be seeing my power output for the first time. And I trained harder than I ever had during that month. So when I got the Peloton and they had me take a new FTP test, when I got an FTP of 317, rather than being a rational person and saying, wait, that seems a little high, I let my hubris get the best of me. Let me put this in context. Based on my weight, if my FTP were 317, I'd be cycling at category A, the top tier of Zwift races. Zwift is a kind of competitor to Peloton, but it's more for like cyclists and you can race. My old FTP of 234 puts me down in category C, so 2 categories below. To think that I had magically in 1 month jumped up 2 categories to the top category. Yeah, so I'm an idiot. I just like accepted it. I was like, oh, I guess my FTP is 317. And I continued on with the training program for like 3 weeks. But each week I was looking at my power output and comparing it to other people on Strava. Eventually I start to get a little suspicious. I had these, and again, these are accurate within plus or minus 1%. So I put these on the Peloton, and then I rode for a little bit. And that's when I learned the Peloton was not only off, it was off by a lot. At some points, it was off by almost 100 watts. As in, it was saying I was way stronger than I actually was. And I was devastated because I thought I was a top tier elite athlete. And in my devastation, I did another stupid thing. In order for this experiment to be untainted, I would just leave that calibration alone, right? Because the first test was on my real bike and the last test would be on my real bike. So anything I did on the Peloton was relative to the Peloton. So yeah, Peloton said my FTP was 317 and in Peloton land, it was. So I should just leave it, finish the course, and then worry about it. Leave it. Leave it. Okay. I was still delusional at this point. I was thinking, all right, it's off. The calibration's wrong. But if I correct the calibration, maybe my FTP really is 317. Maybe in the 1 month and 3 weeks, I have become that strong. You probably know where this is going. I put these back on. I used them to help me calibrate. I talked to customer service. I got it as close as I could. Remember, it's not as accurate as the pedals. And then I got back on. I left my FTP at 317 and I set out on an endurance ride. It was the next ride in the course. It was supposed to be 45 minutes, zone 2, zone 3. Remember, zone 2 and 3, it's at the bottom of the scale, zones that you should be able to ride 4 hours. I did 45 minutes, and at the end, I was toast. Normally on an endurance ride, my heart rate is like 145-ish. I kind of have a high heart rate. This was much higher though.
Peloton, you got 2 minutes, hold it!
Oh. My average heart rate was 176 beats a minute. I think I capped out on the ride at like 197, which isn't my highest, but it's pretty high up there. And then when I looked at the average watts over the course of the ride, 223, which is even lower than the 234 FTP. Like had my FTP actually gone down? Remember at the beginning I mentioned the way the pedals calculate power and the way the Peloton calculates power is different, and that's really annoying. So I had to figure out what the actual difference between the uncalibrated and calibrated Peloton was. I looked at a bunch of rides, I compared power zones, and I found the average difference between the two and used that to come to a new FTP 247. Much closer to 234. That one seemed reasonable. I reset it and continued with my training program. The day I reset it, I recorded some video. I'm not going to put it all in here because it's basically exactly what I just told you. But you can look into my eyes and you can see the sadness because I've realized that I'm not as strong as I thought I was. Anyways, let's put it in. Let's see how it feels. And then I'm just going to do like a training montage thing, and I'll see you again here in a couple weeks after we do all this. So. Wish me luck. I don't know if it was because like my recalibration was wrong or if I've just been overtraining. The last like week and a half has been hard, but I've been trying to set myself up for success this morning. I've set up all the fans. I'm gonna suit up and off we go. It went up! 262? It's insane. I was so thrilled. 262. It didn't take long before I started thinking about 317 again because that has been in my head. I really gave it all, but also like at one point I thought I had an FTP of 317. I'll get there. Not today. Not today. Like 262 is not bad. And I was feeling good for a little while. Then I started to get a little afraid. Again, the difference between these and the Peloton, like, was that 262 a real 262? You might have noticed in the background of some of that footage, there's another screen, and on that screen there's like video gamey thing with a cyclist. That's Zwift. I had my pedals on the Peloton, but they were sending information to Zwift so I could see my power data. And the numbers on Zwift that were coming from these pedals were still lower than the numbers the Peloton was showing. And that scared me. Did my FTP actually go up? Or were the Peloton's numbers still inflated? When I got on my actual bike, did I actually get stronger? Okay, so driving to the Rose Bowl for my real world FTP. I honestly do not trust the Peloton's power meter. Even after the calibration, it drifted a lot. So I have no idea how this is gonna turn out. I just hope that, for my own ego and pride, I hope I at least get 262 like the Peloton. If I get below my 234 original, I'm gonna be devastated. Here we go. Oh man, 254. At least it wasn't 234. I'm tired. Okay, 254. First off, the experiment was flawed. There was a full month between the first test and when I started training. You saw what a mess the actual training was, but I went up 20 watts and I feel pretty good about that. When you calculate my weight in, I went from 3 watts a kilo to 3.34. Got to get that extra like 0.04 on there, which pushes me from category C on Zwift up to category B. I'm really excited about that. I don't know what that is. I think it's like a 10 or 11% increase in my FTP, which is pretty substantial. But I know there's probably a question you're all asking right now. Did Val's FTP go up? She was right there with me doing this whole program, and I have to say it's pretty incredible because I've been riding my bike for a year. Val went from not riding at all to going through the whole thing, and she did awesome. Her FTP actually went up by like 9%, almost 9%, from 102 watts to 111. I'm really proud of her. And this whole program was actually a lot of fun, despite all the kind of stuff in the middle. Is Peloton the best way to train as like a serious cyclist? Probably not, especially because of like the power meter issues. But it did make me stronger. They have another course, I think it's called Build Your Power Zones. If y'all want to see a video about that, let me know. I'm going to take a break from training for a little while and just like, my ride needs to be more like some long endurance rides. Kind of like last week's video, but longer. If you haven't seen that, you should go check that out right now. I'm trying to get stronger. I'm trying to figure out what kind of like cyclist I am. I'm still at the beginning of my journey. So if y'all have any recommendations for training plans or ideas for future videos, like please put them in the comments. Please like and subscribe. That really does help the channel, especially now that it's transitioning from printing into cycling. If you're still wondering why that happened, check out this other video about why I stopped printing and why I'm cycling now. Yeah, that's it. I hope you all enjoyed it. See you in the next one. I have a bike rack. This is gonna like open up so many rides.